The air in the private gallery was still, smelling of expensive oil paints and sea salt from the Pacific. Malik stood before a massive, floor-to-ceiling canvas, his hand hovering just inches from the textured surface. He didn't need to touch it to feel the hum of the energy underneath. She had that same restless spirit in her fingers, a voice rasped from the doorway, cutting through the silence like a blade. Malik turned. Standing there was Kim Do-hyun, the man whose heart Malik had literally restarted 3 weeks ago in a sun-drenched botanical garden. The investor, the king of the concrete, a man whose tattoos, intricate, ink-black dragons and peonies, peeking out from his tailored white linen sleeves, told a story of a life Malik couldn't imagine. Do-hyun didn't move. He just stared at Malik's face, his dark eyes shimmering with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight in the room. "You didn't just save a stranger's life that day, Malik," Do-hyun whispered, his voice breaking the sterile perfection of the gallery. "You brought back the only piece of her I had left. I spent 18 years convincing myself you didn't exist, so that you could be safe from the man I was." Malik's breath hitched. The gold watch on Do-hyun's wrist caught the sun, flashing a blinding light into Malik's eyes. In that moment, the superpower Malik had spent his life hiding felt like a tether, pulling him toward the very man he should have been running from. He wasn't looking at a mafia boss. He was looking at a mirror. Malik had always been an outsider in the bright, suburban sprawl of Orange County, a black boy with a Korean heart, raised by a mother who spoke of soul as if it were a dream she'd been forced to wake up from. She had died with secrets on her lips, leaving Malik with nothing but a strange, golden warmth in his palms that could knit skin together and pull the fatting back into the light. He lived a quiet life, working as a gardener in the most exclusive estates, blending into the scenery. That was the plan: stay invisible, stay safe. But then came the collapse of Kim Do-hyun. Do-hyun wasn't just wealthy, he was an institution, a man of quiet, terrifying elegance who controlled the flow of commerce with a single nod. When he fell in that glass conservatory, surrounded by rare lilies and the scent of damp earth, Malik hadn't thought about the consequences. He had simply pressed his glowing palms to the man's chest and felt the jagged, cold void of a failing heart. He had filled that void. Now, Malik was no longer a gardener. He was a guest in a mansion of white marble and endless windows. Every meal was a ceremony, every conversation a riddle. Do-hyun watched him with a silent, hungry intensity, as if he were trying to memorize Malik's soul. There were no guns, no threats, only the suffocating beauty of a life Malik didn't understand, and a father who was a stranger, waiting for the right moment to tell the boy that the magic in his hands was the very reason they had been torn apart. Hello, my friend. Let me know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. I'd love to see which parts of the world this story is reaching. Also, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Now, let's dive straight into the story. The sun in Southern California has a specific weight to it, a heavy, golden pressure that makes the air shimmer over the manicured lawns of the ultra-wealthy. Malik preferred the heat. It felt like the warmth that lived under his own skin, the restless hum in his marrow that he had spent 19 years trying to stifle. He was a landscape consultant, a fancy title for a boy who could make dying orchids bloom with a lingering touch. He worked in the shadows of the great estates, a silent observer of a world he wasn't meant to touch, until the day the glass shattered. It happened in the Aurelian Conservatory, a structure of steel and crystal that housed the rarest flora in the hemisphere. Malik was kneeling by a bed of black bat flowers, his fingers gently tracing a withered leaf, sending a microscopic pulse of heat into the stem. That was when he heard it, not a shout, but a soft, wet thud. 10 yards away, a man had collapsed. He wasn't like the other estate owners Malik had seen. This man was younger, perhaps in his late 40s, wearing a white silk shirt that looked like liquid moonlight. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms covered in intricate, swirling patterns of Korean calligraphy and jagged, obsidian-colored scales. This was Kim Do-hyun. Even in a state of near death, he radiated a terrifying, quiet authority. Malik rushed over, his heart hammering against his ribs. Do-hyun's face was ashen, a sharp contrast to the vibrant green of the ferns surrounding him. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the glass ceiling as if he were counting the clouds. Malik reached out, his instinct overriding his fear. He felt for a pulse. There was nothing, just a cold, hollow silence where a rhythm should be. "Don't go," Malik whispered, a phrase he hadn't said since his mother's final breath. He placed both palms flat against Do-hyun's chest. The golden pulse ignited instantly. It wasn't a spark, it was a flood. Malik felt his own vision go white as he poured his vitality into the stranger's failing heart. He felt the scarred valves, the arterial blockages, the wear and tear of a life lived in high-tension rooms and cold boardrooms. He mended them. He knit the muscle back together, feeling the heat of his gift surge through the silk of Do-hyun's shirt. Suddenly, Do-hyun's hand flew up, gripping Malik's wrist with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for a man who had just died. His eyes snapped into focus, dark, piercing, and flooded with a sudden, violent recognition. "Sara," Do-hyun gasped, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. Malik froze. Sara was his mother's name, a name no one in this country knew. The warmth in Malik's hands flickered and died, replaced by a cold, prickling dread. Do-hyun didn't let go of his wrist. He pulled Malik closer, his gaze searching the boy's face, tracing the bridge of his nose, the curl of his hair, and the deep, rich tone of his skin. "You have her light," Do-hyun breathed, his voice a ragged shadow of its former self. I thought I had buried it with her." Before Malik could pull away, a team of silent, suited men burst into the conservatory. They didn't draw weapons. They moved with a clinical, terrifying efficiency. They surrounded them, their shadows eclipsing the sun. But Do-hyun never took his eyes off Malik, even as they lifted him onto a stretcher, even as the medical monitors began to beep with the rhythm of a heart that shouldn't be beating. He kept his hand extended toward the boy. Malik stood alone in the center of the glass house, his palms still tingling, the smell of ozone and expensive cologne lingering in the air. He looked down at his hands. For the first time in his life, his gift didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a flare, signaling to a predator that the prey had finally been found. 3 days passed in a fever dream of paranoia. Malik stayed in his small, sun-bleached apartment, the blinds drawn tight against the California glare. He expected the police. He expected the news. He expected to be hunted for the miracle he had performed. But the world remained unnervingly quiet, until a white Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled up to his curb, its paint job so reflective it looked like a mirror moving through the street. A man stepped out, not a thug, but an elderly Korean gentleman in a suit that cost more than Malik's college tuition. He bowed deeply. "Mr. Malik," the man said, his voice like smooth stones shifting in a stream. "My name is Hanul, my master. Mr. Kim Do-hyun requests your presence for tea. It is not a demand. It is a plea." Malik wanted to say no. He wanted to run. But the mention of his mother's name in the conservatory haunted him. He got into the car. The drive took them up the winding cliffs of Malibu, to an estate that seemed to be carved out of the very rock itself. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass, white concrete, and infinity pools that bled into the blue of the Pacific. This was the Solstice Manor. As Malik walked through the front doors, he realized this wasn't just a home, it was a fortress of taste. There were no guards in sight, yet the air felt heavy with eyes. Every hallway was lined with artifacts. Malik stopped in front of a pedestal holding a Joseon-era porcelain vase, and next to it, a hand-carved African mahogany mask. The juxtaposition was deliberate. It was a visual map of a life split between two worlds. Hanul led him to a wide, sun-drenched terrace overlooking the ocean. Do-hyun was sitting there, looking remarkably healthy, though he wore a dark compression wrap around his chest where Malik's hands had been. He was pouring tea into 2 delicate celadon cups. "Sit, Malik," Do-hyun said, not looking up. "The ocean is particularly honest at this hour. It doesn't hide its depths." Malik sat, his movements stiff. "How do you know my mother's name? Why was her picture? Why did you call me her light?" Do-hyun pushed a cup toward him. "Your mother, Sara, was the only thing in my life that wasn't bought or broken. We met in Seoul, a lifetime ago. I was the heir to a legacy of shadows, and she was a student who could see the colors in a gray world. She had a gift, Malik, just like yours, a vitality that the men in my circle wanted to bottle and sell. He leaned forward, the sunlight catching the gold ring on his pinky finger. I sent her away. I staged a betrayal, a cruelty so deep she would never look back. I told myself that if she hated me, she would stay far enough away to survive. I didn't know. I didn't know she was carrying the very thing I was trying to protect. Malik felt the room tilt. The superpower, the heat in his hands, it wasn't a freak accident of nature. It was an inheritance. He looked at Do-hyun's tattoos, realizing for the first time that the ink wasn't just decoration. They were seals. They were markers of a man who had spent his life surrounded by death, while Malik had spent his life giving life. "You're saying," Malik's voice was a whisper, "that you let me grow up thinking I was a mistake, that my mother died in a one-bedroom apartment in East LA while you sat in this palace." Do-hyun's face didn't flinch, but his hand trembled slightly as he picked up his tea. "I am a man of many sins, Malik, but my greatest was believing that silence was the same thing as safety. I thought that by staying dead to you, you would get to live. But then my heart stopped. And you reached into the void and pulled me back. You forced me to look at the debt I owe." He stood up, walking to the edge of the terrace. He looked like a king without a kingdom. "I didn't bring you here to be a son. I brought you here because the world is changing. My enemies know I survived a fatal event. They are looking for the miracle. And if they find out that the miracle has a name and a face, they will come for you." Do-hyun turned back, his expression a mask of cold, lethal determination. "You saved my life, Malik. Now I am going to spend every cent of my blood-soaked fortune making sure you get to keep yours." The cliffhanger wasn't a threat of violence. It was the weight of the gold. Malik looked around the terrace, realizing that the walls of this beautiful mansion weren't there to keep people out. They were there to keep him in. He wasn't a gardener anymore. He was a prince in a tower. And the man who put him there was the one person he was supposed to love, and the one person he had every reason to hate. The days that followed were a blur of organized clinical elegance. Malik was moved into the West Wing, a series of rooms that smelled of fresh cedar and sea air, where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Pacific so perfect it felt artificial. He wasn't a prisoner, or so Hanel told him. He was a legacy in transition. Hanel became Malik's shadow. The elderly man didn't carry a weapon, but he carried a tablet and a fountain pen with a gold nib that he used to take notes on Malik's every reaction. Hanel wasn't a butler. He was a gatekeeper. He began Malik's education, not with books, but with sensory immersion. "The world my master built is a world of whispers, Mr. Malik," Hanel said, as they sat in a sun-drenched courtyard filled with white sand and raked gravel. "In the West, power is a shout. In the East, in the circles Mr. Kim Do-hyun moves in, power is the silence between two breaths. You must learn to breathe without making a sound." Malik hated it. He hated the silk robes they laid out for him. He hated the way the kitchen staff, all of them Korean and impeccably dressed, bowed when he entered the room. They didn't see a black teenager from East LA. They saw a ghost. They saw the golden pulse that lived in his veins. "Why does everyone look at me like I'm a bomb about to go off?" Malik asked, his voice echoing off the marble walls. Hanel paused, his rake suspended over the sand. "Because to them, you are a miracle that violates the laws of nature. In our world, things die when they are meant to die. You changed that. You broke the natural order to save a man who has spent 20 years preparing for his own end. They are waiting to see if the miracle was a gift or a curse." The mystery of his father's business remained a closed door. Malik saw no drugs, no money laundering, no violence. Instead, he saw high-level diplomacy. He watched from a balcony as Do-hyun met with men in charcoal suits, men who looked like prime ministers and tech giants. They sat in the sun, drinking tea, speaking in hushed tones. But there was a tension, a ripple in the water. Malik began to notice the accidents. A vase would shatter when he walked by, the ceramic pieces glowing with a faint, residual heat. A dying bonsai tree in the hallway would suddenly explode into vibrant, unnatural green growth as he passed. His power was reacting to the house. Or perhaps the house was reacting to him. One afternoon, Malik found Hanul in the library, looking at a digital map of the world. Glowing red dots were scattered across the continents. "What are those?" Malik asked. Hanul didn't close the screen. "Those are the waiters, Malik, people with conditions like your father's. People who have all the money in the world but no time left. They have heard rumors of a healer in the house of Kim. Do-hyun is keeping them at bay, but hunger is a difficult thing to negotiate with." Malik looked at his hands. The heat was there, pulsing. He realized that Do-hyun wasn't just protecting him from enemies, he was protecting him from being turned into a commodity, a living battery, a fountain of youth. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His father hadn't just abandoned him to save him from the darkness. He had abandoned him to save him from being used. And now, by saving Do-hyun's life, Malik had put himself back on the map. He was the most valuable asset in the world, and he was trapped in a beautiful cage built by the man who had created the market. If the library was the brain of the Solstice Manor, the North Wing was its heart. It was a restricted area, a place where even Hanul seemed to walk with a heavier step. Malik, fueled by a restless need to find a trace of his mother that wasn't a filtered memory, waited until the sun was at its zenith, when the security protocols shifted for the afternoon rotation. He slipped into the North Gallery. Unlike the rest of the house, which was minimalist and cold, this room felt lived in. It was filled with the scent of turpentine and old paper. Canvases were stacked against the walls, most of them blank. In the center of the room stood an easel, covered by a heavy, velvet cloth. Malik approached it, his heart thumping in his throat. He reached out, his hand trembling. The moment his fingers touched the fabric, a spark of his power jumped, a static discharge of gold light. The cloth slid to the floor. It wasn't a painting of a woman. It was a painting of a moment. In the portrait, a young, tattooed Do-hyun, looking raw and dangerous, was sitting on a park bench in what looked like Seoul's Olympic Park. Leaning against his shoulder was a woman with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that held the entire sun. It was Malik's mother, Sora. She was laughing, her hand resting on Do-hyun's chest, right where Malik had placed his palms to save him. But it was the detail that caught Malik's breath. Around Sora's neck was a pendant, a teardrop-shaped opal that seemed to glow on the canvas. Malik recognized it. He had found that same pendant in his mother's jewelry box after she died, but the stone had been dull, gray, dead. In the painting, it was vibrant. "It was a capacitor," a voice said from the shadows. Do-hyun stepped out from behind a partition. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper in the unforgiving afternoon light. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, and for the first time, Malik saw the full extent of the ink on his arms. It wasn't just art, it was a record, names, dates, and symbols of the lives he had taken or influenced. "The stone," Do-hyun continued, gesturing to the painting. "It was designed to bleed off your mother's excess energy. She was like you, Malik, too much life for one body to hold, without a way to vent it. It would have burned her out from the inside. She gave it to you when you were born, she thought. She hoped that you would be normal, that the gift wouldn't follow the blood." Malik turned to him, his eyes stinging. "You painted this. You remember the way she looked when she was happy." "I remember nothing else," Do-hyun said, his voice thick with a restrained, ancient grief. "I kept this room locked because I am a coward, Malik. I can run a multi-billion-dollar empire. I can command 1,000 men with a whisper, but I cannot look at her face and not feel the gravity of my failure." Do-hyun walked to the painting, his fingers hovering over the image of Sora's hand. "She left because I asked her to. I told her I was a monster. I told her that my world would devour her light. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was the hero of a tragic story." He looked at Malik, his gaze unwavering. "But I was just a man who was afraid of a power he couldn't control. I let her die alone, in a country she didn't know, because I was too proud to be weak. And now, I see her in you, not just the face, not just the power, but the way you look at me, with the same judgment she had. You are the only person in this world who sees me for what I truly am." Malik looked from the painting to the man. The superpower wasn't the healing. It was the connection. He realized that the heat in his hands was a bridge, a physical manifestation of a love that had been suppressed for 2 decades. "She didn't hate you," Malik said, the words feeling heavy in the air. "She never spoke your name, but she kept the pendant. She kept it until the day she couldn't breathe anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Do-hyun closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the ink on his cheek. For a moment, the Mafia boss was gone. There was only a father, standing in a room full of ghosts, realizing that his son was the only living thing he had left. "There is a safe in the floor beneath the easel," Do-hyun whispered. "The code is your birthday. Inside is the truth about why I stayed away, and why I can never let you leave this house. Open it, Malik, and then decide if you want to save me again, or if you want to let me burn." The safe beneath the easel didn't click or whir. It breathed. When Malik entered the digits of his birth, the only date his mother had ever celebrated with true fervor, the floor panel slid back with the sound of grinding stone. Inside wasn't a stash of cash or a collection of firearms. Instead, Malik found a series of leather-bound ledgers and a vacuum-sealed medical file labeled in both Korean and English. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, amber streaks across the gallery floor as Malik began to read. The documents were dated 25 years ago, originating from a private laboratory in Jeju. It wasn't a superpower, not in the way the movies described it. The files used words like biological resonance and cellular acceleration. Malik's eyes scanned the pages, his heart sinking as he realized the truth. The gift was a genetic anomaly, a mutation in the mitochondrial DNA that allowed the host to transfer their own cellular frequency to another. But there was a catch, a devastating, hidden cost that the ledgers detailed in cold, clinical rows of numbers. The healers didn't just mend others, they consumed themselves. Malik looked at a graph showing the life expectancy of those with the golden pulse. It was a downward slope, sharp and unforgiving. Every time his mother had used her gift to help a neighbor or heal a stray animal, she was shaving months, perhaps years, off her own life. She hadn't just died of illness. She had given herself away, cell by cell, until there was nothing left but the shell. "She knew," Malik whispered, the paper trembling in his hand. "She knew it was killing her, and she never told me." He looked deeper into the file and found Do-hyun's medical records. They were identical to his mother, yet different. Do-hyun's pulse was dormant. He had the genetic marker, but it hadn't activated. Instead, it had mutated into a slow-growing toxicity, a biological debt that was now coming due. The heart failure in the garden wasn't a random event, it was the legacy finally catching up to him. "The blood is a double-edged sword, Malik," Do-hyun said, standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the burning orange sky. "Your mother had the light, I have the shadow. I spent millions trying to find a way to stabilize it. I funded research into gene therapy, into synthetic capacitors. Anything to ensure that if you inherited her gift, you wouldn't inherit her fate." Malik stood up, the heat in his palms feeling like a curse. "Is that why you sent her away? Because you were using her as a test subject?" Do-hyun turned, his face a mask of sudden, sharp agony. "No, I sent her away because my father, the man who built this empire, saw her as a resource. He wanted to breed a generation of healers to serve the family's interests. I had to make him believe she was worthless. I had to make him believe the child she carried was a mistake, a bastard with no value. I chose your life over my presence in it." The weight of the sacrifice was suffocating. Malik looked at his father, the man with the tattoos and the white silk shirts, and saw a man who had been playing a 20-year game of chess against his own bloodline. Every luxury in this house, every piece of art, every high-level connection. It had all been a shield. "You're dying, aren't you?" Malik asked, the silence in the room growing heavy. "The healing I did in the garden, it was only temporary. The shadow in your blood is still there." Do-hyun didn't deny it. He simply looked out at the ocean. "The shadow is my penance, but you are the correction, you have the light, but you also have my strength. If we can find a way to balance the resonance. You won't have to burn out like she did. But to do that, I have to give you everything. The money, the influence, the secrets. I have to make you a king so that no one can ever turn you into a tool." The next morning, the Solstice Manor felt different. The beauty was still there, the sparkling infinity pool, the white marble, the scent of jasmine, but the mystery had been replaced by a looming, inevitable choice. Do-hyun invited Malik onto the Sora, a sleek, white yacht anchored in the private cove below the estate. There were no crew members, just the two of them. The yacht moved silently through the glass-like water, the coast of California fatting into a hazy gold line on the horizon. They sat on the deck, the wind ruffling Malik's hair. For the first time, they weren't boss and guest. They weren't even legend and heir. They were just a father and a son, two men burdened by a miracle they never asked for. "I used to watch you," Do-hyun admitted, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ocean. "I had a man in Lowe's Angels. Every month he would send me a file, photos of you at the park, your school reports. I watched you discover your gift when you were 6, when you healed that bird in the alleyway. I almost came for you then. I was halfway to the airport before Hanel stopped me." Malik leaned against the railing, watching the spray of the water. "Why did you stay away? I needed a father. She needed help." "If I had come for you, the waiters would have followed," Do-hyun said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The men I work with, they aren't businessmen, Malik. They are monsters who have forgotten how to die. If they knew what you were, they would have caged you. They would have drained you like a well. I had to become the most terrifying man in the world just to keep them from looking in your direction." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was a ring, a heavy gold band set with a stone that looked like a trapped star. "This is the signet of the sun," Do-hyun said. "It's not just jewelry. It's the key to the foundation I've been building in secret. It holds the patents for the stabilization technology. It holds the deeds to the clinics I've opened in Seoul and Accra. It is a kingdom of life built on a mountain of less honorable things." He held the ring out to Malik. "I am stepping down. The Mafia you think I lead, it's being dismantled. I've spent the last 3 years turning a criminal organization into a global medical network. But I need a face. I need someone the world can trust. Someone who isn't covered in the ink of the past." Malik looked at the ring, then at his father's hands. He saw the tattoos, the records of a life spent in the dark. He realized that Do-hyun's wealth wasn't just money. It was a massive, elaborate apology. He had built a world where Malik could finally be himself without hiding. "I don't want a kingdom," Malik said, his voice firm. "I just wanted to know who I was." "You are the bridge, Malik." Do-hyun whispered. "You are the son of a woman who gave everything, and a man who took everything. You are the balance." The boat swayed gently in the swells. In that moment, the tension that had defined Malik's life, the fear of his power, the anger at his abandonment, began to dissolve. He didn't take the ring, not yet. Instead, he reached out and placed his hand over Do-hyun's. For the first time, Malik didn't push his power. He didn't try to heal. He just felt the rhythm of his father's heart, a slow, steady beat that was finally, for the first time in 20 years, at peace. "I'll help you," Malik said, the words a promise. "But we do it my way, no more secrets, no more shadows, we walk in the light, or we don't walk at all." Do-hyun nodded, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. "The light it is then, it's a beautiful day for it." The transition did not happen in a basement or a smoke-filled room. It happened on the 80th floor of a glass and steel monolith in downtown Lowe's Angels, a building that seemed to drink the sunlight and turn it into sheer, blinding power. This was the headquarters of the Dusora Global Initiative. The name was a fusion, a marriage of his father's family name and his mother's memory. Malik stood in the dressing room, looking at himself in a mirror that spanned the entire wall. He was no longer the boy in the stained cargo pants from the botanical garden. He wore a suit of charcoal silk, tailored so perfectly it felt like a second skin. On his finger, the signet of the sun felt heavy, a grounding weight that reminded him of the responsibility he now carried. "You look like a man who has finally stopped running," Hanel said, appearing in the doorway. The elderly advisor looked older today, his eyes softened by a rare expression of pride. "The board members are waiting. The world's cameras are live. They expect to see the successor to a criminal empire. They have no idea they are about to see the beginning of a new era. Malik turned, his palms warm, but the heat was no longer a frantic, uncontrolled hum. It was a steady, rhythmic glow. "Is he ready?" "Mr. Kim is already on the podium," Hanul replied. He wanted to be the one to introduce the light. Malik walked through the glass corridors, his reflection ghosting beside him. He could hear the low murmur of the press corps and the sharp, rhythmic clicking of shutters. As he stepped out onto the stage, the light was overwhelming. Thousands of watts of studio lighting combined with the midday sun pouring through the atrium. Kim Do-hyun stood at the lectern. He looked frail, yet more powerful than Malik had ever seen him. He wasn't hiding his tattoos today, the ink peeked out from his cuffs, a deliberate statement that the past was being acknowledged, not erased. "For 20 years, Do-hyun's voice boomed through the speakers. "The House of Kim has been a shadow. We moved in the spaces between laws. We built a kingdom on the philosophy of survival, but survival is not the same as living." The room went silent. Do-hyun turned his head, locking eyes with Malik. "I have spent my life protecting a treasure I didn't deserve. Today, I am not just stepping down. I am dissolving the old structures. Every asset, every ledger, and every ounce of influence held by my family is being transferred to a non-profit foundation dedicated to biological research and universal healing." A collective gasp rippled through the room. This was the death of the Mafia on a global stage. "And to lead this new world," Do-hyun continued, his voice thick with emotion, "I introduce to you my son, Malik Kim. He is the proof that even from the deepest shadows, something miraculous can grow." Malik stepped forward. He didn't have a prepared speech. He reached the lectern and looked out at the sea of faces, the waiters, the skeptics, the journalists. He looked back at his father, in a move that wasn't in the script. Malik reached out and grasped Do-hyun's hand. A faint, golden shimmer traced the connection between them. It wasn't a secret anymore. Malik wasn't just a CEO, he was the living evidence. "My mother told me that a gift is only a gift if you give it away," Malik said, his voice steady and resonant. "We are not here to sell miracles. We are here to make them common. My father built a fortress to keep me safe, but today we are tearing down the walls to let everyone else in." The applause was a distant roar. In that moment, the mystery was solved. Malik knew who he was. He was the bridge between a black mother's love and a Korean father's penance. He was the healer of a broken lineage, and as he stood there in the golden light, he realized that the greatest superpower wasn't the heat in his hands. It was the ability to forgive a man who had done the wrong things for the right reasons. 1 year later, the Aurelian Conservatory was no longer a private playground for the elite. It had been converted into a public research center, a place where the air was always thick with the scent of blooming life and the sound of children's laughter. Malik sat on a stone bench in the center of the garden, the same spot where he had found a dying man 12 months ago. The sun was warm on his face, but he wasn't working. He was sketching. In his lap was a notebook filled with designs for a new kind of medical center, one built on the principles of the resonance he had finally mastered. "The lilies are taller this year," a voice said. Malik looked up and smiled. Kim Do-hyun walked toward him, leaning slightly on a cane made of polished ebony. He looked retired, his white hair caught in the breeze, his face tanned from hours spent on the deck of the Sora. He was no longer the boss. He was a man who spent his afternoons arguing with Hanul about the best way to grow tomatoes. "That's because you stopped staring at them, Dad," Malik joked, standing up to embrace him. "They don't like the pressure." Do-hyun laughed, a sound that was once rare but now came easily. He looked around the conservatory, at the people wandering through the greenery, at the scientists in white coats discussing data. "You did it, Malik. You turned my fortress into a fountain. I look at this place, and I finally see your mother's eyes without the grief." "She'd like it here," Malik said, looking up at the glass ceiling. "It's bright, no one is hiding." Do-hyun reached out, his hand, still covered in the faded ink of his former life, resting on Malik's shoulder. "Hanul says the board wants to expand to Seoul next month. They want the healer to make an appearance." Malik looked at his palms, The golden warmth was there, quiet, sustained, and balanced. He had learned to use the capacitors Do-hyun had developed, ensuring his life wouldn't be cut short. He had a future. He had a name. "I'll go," Malik said, "but only if you come with me. I think it's time you showed me the park where you met her. I want to see where the light started." Do-hyun nodded, his eyes shimmering. I'd like that very much." They walked out of the conservatory together, two men silhouetted against the brilliant California sun. The story that began with a secret heart failure ended with a shared heartbeat, a legacy of shadows finally finding its way home into the light.